As a women's health professional, you already know how important menstrual cycle tracking is. But are you equipped to support your clients with complex cases? Do you know how to read complex menstrual cycle charts? Were you ever taught step-by-step protocols to deal with irregular bleeding patterns, abnormal cervical mucus, chaotic basal body temperatures, or progesterone issues? That's where FAMM comes in. The Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program is designed specifically for women's health professionals with busy practices. We've cut out all the fluff so we can be laser focused on what you need to serve your clients better. Registration is open now for the next class of FAMM. Classes start towards the end of October. Apply today at fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 540. Today, I'm sharing a brand new episode in our FAMM Practitioner series. I'm sharing my conversation with Kármen, Kollár. And in this episode, she shares her very interesting and unique journey into this work. So Karmen is a fertility awareness educator. That is how she jumped into the FAMM program. So she was already a fertility awareness educator when she decided to join the program. And she shares why she chose to join FAMM to enhance her skill set and confidence in a variety of specific areas. As you listen to this episode, you may resonate with some of Kármen's experiences, as she certainly wasn't open to the approach of, let's say, painkillers, the birth control pill, as the first port of call for her period issues. And what's interesting about that path, for those of you who are listening and have chosen that kind of alternate path, is that it's not necessarily an easier path. When you don't take birth control pills to suppress your cycle, then if you have an issue with your menstrual cycle, the issue persists. And it persists and persists until you have the tools to address it and resolve it so that your cycle actually becomes normal. And the normal track, as we all know, that we are provided by our medical providers typically is simply the birth control pill to give us a bleed every 28 days. And we have then the impression that the issue is resolved. But ultimately, if we were to come off that birth control pill, the issue would still be there because we haven't really addressed it. So really interesting topics coming into today's episode. And before we jump in, I want to share a little bit about Kármen. Kármen is a dedicated holistic reproductive health coach and fertility awareness educator with a mission to empower women to take control of their menstrual health and fertility naturally. She helps clients transition away from hormonal birth control, overcome irregular menstrual cycles, and unlock the profound health insights hidden within their menstrual charts. Karmen guides clients in mastering the art of fertility awareness, a lifelong skill that enables them to conceive or prevent pregnancy naturally and understand the root causes of their menstrual health issues. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. So I'm really excited to be here today with Kármen. She has been in the program for several months now. We're in the midst of everything, in the midst of client case reports and practicum studies and everything. So a great time to have this chat. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. And I was joking when we were doing our little pre-chat, because I am not saying your name correctly with your accent. So I would love for you to introduce yourself. Let us know where you are from. And my absolute favorite question to ask is, when did you first start menstruating? And then feel free to kind of let us know your experience. What kind of led you to jump into this world of fertility awareness teaching?
Okay, so my name is pronounced as Kármen Kollár, and I'm originally from Hungary, but right now I'm based in Finland, where my husband is from. And the first period, I can't pinpoint the exact age, but I was around 13 when I got my first period, 13 or 14. And I remember that because my mom has already undergone a hysterectomy at that time, she suggested that my sister have the talk with me since she felt kind of out of touch with the whole process. And my sister did her best. She showed me the panty liners, the pads, the tampons, explained the difference, told me that I would have a monthly bleed approximately. It might come with some pain, and that was pretty much it. So that's how I started my menstruating years. And my cycles were irregular right from the start. And my mom and I used to joke that my period was very friendly because it would disappear for the entire summer, allowing me to enjoy the beach without a second thought. So initially, I thought that was a good thing. And I didn't have pain either. So I wasn't concerned. But then a few years later, when I was about 15 or 16, my mom started to get concerned about the irregularity. And she took me to see a gynecologist for the first time. And the OBGYN said that everything's fine. Maybe my cycle needs some more time to normalize. But I can also take some hormonal contraceptives. The usual. Both my mom and I were uneasy about that, so we decided against it. And around the same time, I was also struggling with some pretty bad acne. And the dermatologist at the local health center brought up hormonal contraceptives again. But at my next visit, I saw a different dermatologist, and she shared a very personal story about her close friend who had recently died from a blood clot caused by the pill. So she highly suggested against prescribing hormonal contraceptives for acne. And this story really solidified my instinctive feeling that I didn't want to go on hormonal contraceptives. And then I had some other things in the upcoming years, like my irregular cycles continued, and I had somewhat improved acne, but it was persistent. And I also had some unexplained weight gain and weight loss periods, and I couldn't really contribute it to anything. But then in my early 20s, things took a turn for the worse because I started experiencing some sudden crashes, as I call it, and dizziness. They got so bad that, especially after movement classes, my dance classes, so I even stopped dancing for a while out of fear because I thought maybe it's the dance classes which are causing this, but the symptoms didn't improve. And then I also had some lower belly pain at some point, and I was diagnosed with lactose intolerance, but switching to a lactose-free diet didn't solve those issues. And then one morning, the pain was so intense that I actually fainted in our bathroom. And I don't know how long I was there on the floor, but after that, it was like very early in the morning, so everyone else was sleeping in the house. And when I woke up, I went to my mom and she arranged for a full hospital examination for me the very same day. And initially they thought it's a gastro issue, but I was also referred to the obstetrics and gynecology unit, where an ultrasound, there was a cyst in my ovary, which has recently ruptured. So that's what caused that severe lower belly pain. And I was admitted to that part of the hospital for observation. And I was staying there for several days, not really knowing what was happening because no one was really explaining anything. But after I was released, I finally saw an OBGYN who explained that based on my results, I most likely had PCOS. And she sent me to do some further hormonal tests and glucose tolerance tests, which confirmed that, there were elevated male hormone levels. I had insulin resistance. And so I finally got the PCOS diagnosis. And I was quite lucky, I think, because based on the stories I've heard, many women don't really get much information after the diagnosis. But my OBGYN was very nice and proactive, and she even arranged an appointment with a nutritionist for me, who introduced me to the diet they usually use with diabetics, like the 160 grams of carbs per day. She explained like what are low glycemic foods. And I was also prescribed metformin, but I couldn't tolerate it due to severe nausea. So I didn't end up taking that for long. And this was the point where I started learning more about my cycles and my health, because my grandmother had diabetes, and I was really determined that, oh my God, insulin resistance, I really don't want to end up like that. What can I do? And I started digging and reading about menstrual cycles and nutrition, and I read books and articles, but I still knew relatively little about my cycles now in retrospect, because one day I proudly told a friend that I was glad I got my period, which meant that I must have ovulated, right? And my cycles are regular. And she was studying fertility awareness at the time, and she gently corrected me and explained that I can have a bleed without having ovulated. And that was a shocker. At first, I didn't even understand what she was talking about, but it sparked a deeper curiosity. And I got the book she suggested, which was Taking Charge of Your Fertility, which for many women is the start of their fertility awareness journey. So I'm forever grateful to my friend Sophia for that conversation, because she really started me on this journey. And yeah, I just continued with, taking care of my health and figuring out what worked for me and what didn't work for me. And about 3 to 4 years after my initial PCOS diagnosis, I had another round of tests, and those showed no signs of PCOS anymore. So the male hormone levels were normal, the glucose tolerance test was clear, and even though my cycles were still on the longer side, they had mostly normalized. So I have become asymptomatic, basically. And I was very, very thrilled about that. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing so much. I love asking these questions. I always learn more, even though we spent so much time together, I always learn so much more. Or maybe just the kind of rich, full story part that you don't always get when you focus on some of the details. It's interesting to hear what led you to this work, having your own personal experience with irregular cycles and the various challenges with medical professionals. Really interesting part of your story that you kept going to doctors that were telling you to go on the pill until you had the one doctor that, obviously, after having had a friend who passed away as a result of the blood clot, strongly advised you against it. So I think anyone who's listened to a lot of these episodes, who hears just the different experiences somebody has, it's pretty rare actually to have a doctor so kind of adamantly encourage you to avoid contraceptives. And having one thing as well that if you think about it, I mean, having not gone on contraceptives, then the issue was still there. Right? The issue is persisting.
Exactly.
And that forced you to figure it out. And that's kind of one of the big things about contraceptives, where, like, when I talk about contraceptives critically and how they mask symptoms, had you gone on contraceptives, there's a lot of those symptoms you probably wouldn't have had, and you wouldn't have been forced to deal with it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because it's like a challenging journey. It took you several years to sort it out, but on the flip side, you did sort it out.
Yeah. Well, it is really mind-blowing if you think about it. What's the chance that someone like that, you come across someone like that, and then they really solidify your beliefs. But I think I'm also lucky because my mom is more like natural minded. And even though we were considering contraceptives, we never like really thought that I would go on them. And I remember I was quite like fierce and adamant about it, because even when I got into my first serious relationship, I was very determined that we would use like barrier methods and I'm not going on hormonal contraceptives, because I just thought it was like so unfair. Why would I put synthetic hormones into my body, even though I didn't fully understand at the time how the cycle works and how contraceptives work? I just had this very instinctive feeling of like, I just only knew that they contain synthetic hormones, and that was enough for me to think like there must be better options. Like, why would I do this to my body? So yeah, I think that's kind of very deep knowledge, or maybe I was still like connected to my body and I really wanted to understand the root causes of things. It really drove me to find better solutions, because I never was satisfied with the, oh yeah, like we don't know what it might be, but oh, there's this pill you can take. And every time I asked, like, okay, like what does it do or how will it help me, the responses weren't very satisfactory. So, yeah.
I think they wouldn't be able to describe satisfactorily what it does. Well, to my satisfaction, probably.
Yeah, that's a good point. A very good point.
Well, and something else, I mean, it feels when you tell your story, it was like it was meant to be, like, right? Like, it's kind of like, I think you were supposed to do this work. Because also, when they identified the PCOS and they tried to put you on Metformin, which is obviously the most common solution that between the birth control pill and Metformin, those are the kind of two main go-tos for PCOS as far as the conventional system is concerned. But you couldn't tolerate it due to severe nausea. So it was almost like you were predisposed to sort this out in other ways. And you mentioned that about 3 to 4 years after your initial diagnosis, your tests were normal and your cycles, it sounds like your cycles were consistent. They were still a bit on the longer end, but overall they were no longer, significantly irregular. So would you share with us what did you do? How did you sort this out?
Yeah, of course. Well, initially I started with diet changes, because that was the thing which the nutritionist explained to me back then. I really started counting carbs and weighing the food I was eating. But initially it wasn't working, because I think I was under eating protein, which in retrospect now I understand. But back then I didn't know why I was always hungry. Because if you only eat little carbs and then you don't eat other foods which would give you the feeling of fullness, then obviously you're going to be hungry. And on top of that, I was also told to lose weight, which most women with PCOS are told, but they never tell you how. So my best solution, which I've obviously seen from different sources, was doing aerobics exercises. And I was doing these very intense aerobics workouts almost daily. And so that made me even hungrier. And so I just figured that will not work in the long term. There was a point where I was very disappointed, but then I decided that, okay, let's just try to feel out what actually my body feels like doing and what I feel like doing. And I dropped the amount and intensity of my workouts. I went back to dancing, which I always loved, but it's less intensity. And I was still watching my carbs, but I became more flexible with it. So if I had movement that day, then I was okay with eating a bit more. And not super fast, but over many months, I started losing some weight. And I started feeling better because my blood sugar was more balanced. And I could really see the connection between what I ate and how I moved and my overall feeling and also my cycles. And I think that there was an additional piece which I understood a bit later, that my mental health is very strongly connected to it too, because I noticed that when I had periods of, well, let's say more difficult or stressed periods in my life, then it was harder to balance my blood sugar levels, and my mood was shifting more often, and I put on maybe 1 or 2 kilos, and when I felt more balanced overall, then everything was easier with my cycles too. Yeah, these were the main blocks: the diet, the movement, but not too intense movement, and then just trying to pay attention to the mental health aspect as well. And well, later when I started learning fertility awareness more in depth, then I understood much, much more. But I'm glad that even initially I figured out sort of like the most important parts for myself, which kept things mainly in balance.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there was still some fine tuning to do.
Well, of course. But what's interesting is that you kind of tried it their way and then it didn't work. And then you kind of felt into what you said, what worked for your body. And so at what point in this journey then did you actually encounter the charting piece of it? I love the story that you shared with your friend, like correcting you, like actually, I love that. And I love how it inspired you to like do the whole, like you went down the whole rabbit hole, obviously.
Yeah.
So at what point did that become part of what you were doing?
Well, at the end of my master's, I got a scholarship to the US to study there for 1 year. And this is where I met this friend, Sophia, who introduced me to this concept. And we were living in the same residence center. And it was just like a random pre-dinner conversation in the kitchen. And I just ordered the book, I think maybe the next day, because I went to her room, she showed the book to me. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I need to know all this stuff. And then I started reading parts of it, but I wasn't using charting for birth control back then, or I wasn't measuring my basal body temperature regularly. Initially I was just, I started understanding more about the cycle and my cervical mucus patterns. I did measure my temperature every now and then, but I wasn't confident enough to learn this from a book. So eventually I found an educator, Brandy Oswald at Sauvage Wellness, and I took a course with her. She's teaching the symptothermal method. So after that, I was then quite confident in using it for my own purposes for birth control. And then I started charting regularly. And right after that, I also did a fertility awareness educator training. But I think there's an important part which I didn't mention, and that was that I was at graduate school at the University of Chicago, and I was very convinced that I would be working at academia and I would become like a lecturer. But as time passed by, I decided or realized that that's not where my heart was. And by that time, I was already married to my current husband, and we decided that we would move back to Finland, where he's from. And this transition triggered an identity crisis for me because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life anymore, especially since I didn't speak Finnish, which was essential for finding a job in my field there. And suddenly the pieces started to come together. I've always had a passion for helping people and teaching. I realized that I could combine this with my growing interest in fertility awareness. And over the years, I had many conversations with friends about their reproductive health concerns. And it became clear to me how little we are taught about our bodies, and most women need more information to make informed decisions about their health and to be able to heal themselves the way I did with myself. And so that's when I decided to pursue a career in fertility awareness education.
Attention women's health professionals, the next round of FAMM is just around the corner. Classes are starting toward the end of October. FAMM is the perfect program for busy women's health professionals who want to offer fertility awareness charting support in their practice. FAMM cuts out all the fluff and only focuses on what you need to serve your clients better. Each module, homework assignment, in-class training, and chart review session is there for a reason. Where will you be 9 months from now? With a FAMM certification, you'll have a brand new skill set that will allow you to use the menstrual cycle as a diagnostic tool and vital sign in your practice. Your confidence in analyzing and interpreting menstrual cycle charts will be at a level you can't even imagine today. And you'll have a brand new offering in your business that will allow you to reach more clients. This knowledge is truly life-changing. Transform your practice in 9 months. You won't regret it. Join us this year in FAMM. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive to apply today. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. Oh, I love that. It is. I just absolutely love hearing how things unfold. So it's just like all the pieces just kind of like aligned. Although I'm guessing that when you were experiencing it, it didn't necessarily feel like it was right. It's always in retrospect that it's like, oh, all these things led to this point, but in the middle of it, it probably didn't feel like that at times. And you mentioned that you took, and I remember we had a conversation before you joined FAMM, and I mean, you obviously took a fertility awareness educator program prior to joining FAMM. So do you want to share a little bit about what was it that you were looking for, perhaps, that you didn't quite get in your fertility awareness program?
Yeah. Well, in the fertility awareness educator program I did before, I had practice clients and I already started teaching. And I was quite confident in teaching the method for birth control or to get pregnant, even with like more complex charting scenarios. But I was really bothered by the fact that when I noticed something on a chart, I could not help my clients to address their hormonal and menstrual cycle issues in a deeper, more tailored way. And I did not want to teach them only to chart. I wanted to be able to use cycle charting as a diagnostic tool, as we do in the FAMM program, and as a basis for suggesting diet and lifestyle changes and helping them to feel healthy and good again. I also wanted to learn more about how to build a fertility awareness business. And also what I did not realize back then, but now is also clear to me in retrospect, is that there was so much more I could still learn about observing and categorizing cervical mucus. So that was not my initial motivation. Yeah, I really got even more than what I expected. And I think that FAMM is really, really amazing in making you feel like that when someone comes to you with a problem, then you really have ideas and you have a system to guide them and to help them. And you also understand very well where your boundaries are, where you might have to refer people further. before I could teach them how to chart, for many people it was very useful and very important in connecting to their bodies or getting pregnant. But most clients, when they come to you, they have something else very often, and you see things on their charts. And for me, I just wanted to be able to offer more.
Mm-hmm. I mean, thank you for sharing that. I feel like I remember when we had the conversation, and I've had many conversations like that. Well, it's like, I know all this stuff already. Like, what are you going to teach me? Right. But I think this is, well, it's going back to that kind of rabbit hole analogy. There's always a lot to know. And one of the challenges, and I'm sure this has come up on the podcast before, is when you graduate, if you are in a fertility awareness educator program, most of them teach you, like you said, to teach women to chart. But when you start working, especially if you have a lot of clients, like if you kind of eventually get up your practice and you're working with a lot of women, you find that a lot of these women are struggling with something. You know, most of your clients are not just, you do see occasionally clients who their charts are pretty even keel, but it's certainly not the majority. At least that's what I found in my practice. And without that additional insight, you're just feeling a little helpless. Like, well, what do I do? How do I address this? So I'm glad that you mentioned that. To think of another question, I don't know if it's putting you on the spot, but now that you're midway through the practicum and everything, do you want to share a little bit about, like, it probably hasn't changed your practice yet, but maybe share some of the ideas that you have of how this may impact your practice in the future now that you can kind of expand your offering and how you're working with clients?
Well, as I'm already doing my practicum, it is already impacting my practice. But I think that the major changes are that I really have a very solid framework based on how I work and how I help my clients. So even before I was working one-on-one, and I always try to tailor the content to that person's needs, but I can just offer so much more from the perspective of balancing hormones or addressing menstrual cycle issues. So I think how it transforms my practice is that it gives even more structure and more like laser focus. So it's just very good for a very good framework for figuring out what's most important, what should be addressed first, what are the steps, what we're gonna do. And I just feel overall more confident in bringing my clients through that, because I'm quite confident in that I can deliver certain results. And I think that for many fertility awareness educators and many programs, this might be some part, which of course I only have experience with one, but I've heard from other educators as well that this might be something they struggle with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, from my experience, this program was developed, over the course of my career out of necessity, out of facing those issues and wanting to support women to not only just chart, because that's not what they were asking for. They were asking for help, essentially. And one of the questions, I'm sure we've talked about this in class, but as you delve into this field, it's kind of like, well, what can I do? If you're not a medical doctor, you can have that kind of, what is it that I can do to help? But then you realize that there's a place for the medical doctor. There's also a place for this role as well, because the types of conversations that you're having with your clients, the level of support is typically not something that it wouldn't even be fair to think that a doctor could be providing, this long of sessions over this period of time, over this kind of, like, the way that we practice. It's a different modality. So I think there's certainly a place for all of us to support women in these different ways. I mean,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's really, I think it's important for everybody in this field to have that conversation with themselves of, like, what is it that I can do? How can I help? And right, and where do I fit in? So as we start,
Yes.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, just one more thing which came to my mind, which I haven't mentioned, is that I think it's also very nice in FAMM that you have so much experience with client work, and just by observing you teaching us and giving us ideas about how to teach, I think I developed so much as a teacher, and my skills of supporting my clients, how to talk, how to ask questions, how to hold their hand and bring them from A to B. That's just something which I think comes with your experience, and tapping into that is really priceless.
Oh, thank you so much, Carmen. That is wonderful. I think sometimes because it's, when people say like, oh, it comes naturally to me. It didn't always,
Yeah.
right? But after you've done something for decades, then it does seem effortless, right? So I don't often think about that, but on the other hand, part of the reason that I've designed the program the way that I did, so what I observed, so to share something interesting and why I designed the program to be this group setting where we, for instance, when we do our hot seat sessions, and hot seats is simply having one-on-one sessions with everyone there. But the reason why we do that is because when I first started practicing, I had a combination of my group coaching programs and my one-on-one programs. And what I would find sometimes is that my group coaching clients, by the time we hit month 2, their knowledge would be in a far different place than my one-on-one coaching clients. And there was a couple of reasons for that. I think one of the reasons is because we would have these weekly sessions, and the sessions were to educate in a more general sense. And then we would also have our hot seat sessions to provide that information. So there was kind of like a fast track of information. But there was this rapid learning that took place because, when you have several women in succession in a group setting, one woman has a question and we answer it, but many women in the room had a similar question. So by the time her hot seat comes up, she's already, a lot of those questions have been answered already. So we're really able to zone into what's more important to her. So it's now, I've done this for so long that I don't often think about it actively, but that was one of the reasons that I designed FAMM like that, because I asked myself this question of, well, how did I get to this place where I feel so comfortable with all of these different kinds of charts? And the real answer is that I just saw a lot. I saw a lot of volume. I worked with many, many clients for a very long time. And how can I recreate that for our FAMM practitioners? And so what you experienced is you have a lot of women in the class, so you get to kind of share in the experience of us interpreting their charts in real time. And then when we expand into the practicum, everyone then brings all of their clients. So within the course of a very short time, you're exposed to a lot of charts, and not curated, perfect looking charts that we judged, real charts that come, some half done, some notations wrong, some, where are the notations? Where is the temperature? And we have to actually address it, because that's what it's really like when you're working with real humans. So I'm not sure if you want it, but I really appreciate you sharing that. And I was able to kind of reflect on that, but I'm not sure if you have anything else to share about the experience, like, because I know what I tried to create, but I'm not sitting as a student in the environment.
I think that you explained it correctly, like just, the structure, the process of learning. It's, yeah, you can see and you can feel that there's really like years and years of work and experience behind that. So yeah, I don't have much to add. I agree.
Well, I mean, like I said, thank you. That was a really sweet comment. And as we start wrapping up, I mean, if you have just anything to share for anyone who tuned into this episode, I'm sure when I come up with the title, I might have added PCOS in the title, or for the listener who was, tuned into this episode to learn a little bit more about that, or for somebody who happens to be a fertility awareness educator or on that path, or even in a different kind of profession, but is thinking about joining this program, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that they are in great hands, that if what they are looking for is to fast track their learning and have access to the experience they would probably build themselves with sweat and blood over the next 20 or 30 years, then this is the place for them, because it's really like, you can't put a price tag on this. It's just, yeah. And you can really, even if you have done a fertility awareness educator program, there's so much to learn, and there's so many additional tools and information and knowledge with which you can support your clients, which you will learn at FAMM. So I think it's really worth it.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so sweet. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so now I know that you work with clients all over, not just in Finland, where you're located. So share a little bit about you, about what you have going on, your programs, and where our listeners can go to learn more about what you do.
Sure. Well, at the moment, I'm teaching clients one-on-one during an approximately 4 months course. And I am teaching women who want to avoid or achieve pregnancy with fertility awareness. But I'm also, recently I started working a bit more with women who have PCOS and also women who are going through perimenopause. It just happens so that the women in my network are going through that phase of their life, and I am really enjoying being able to help and ease symptoms around that. But I welcome anyone. And I work with clients from all over pretty much. Yeah, most of my clients are from Finland and Hungary and Europe, but I've worked from people from North America as well. So if it's necessary, I can speak Fahrenheit. No problem. And I can be found on my website, which is KármenKollár.com. That's where you can find my coaching offer and some useful materials and how to contact me. So I hope to see you there.
Great. Thank you so much. And we will make sure to link all of the places on our show notes page. Karmen, this has been an absolute pleasure. It's been a nice opportunity for me to hear, and several thousand of our closest friends, but for us to learn a little bit about your journey. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I just find it fascinating how, listening to your journey, it really sounds as though you were kind of meant to be this work, or like led in this direction, just because of the series of events that took place in your life that led you here. So I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. This was great.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It was really nice to reflect back on these things, and I gained a new perspective. When you talk about things, the pieces come together. So it was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/540. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Karmen. It was really fun for me to hear her whole story in a lot more depth than I've heard in the program itself. And it was also really fun to reflect on how unique her experience was, in the sense that the standard medical options either were not appealing or literally didn't work for her. So in a way, she was kind of forced out of that system to look for other alternatives. And I mean, ultimately, when we look at the menstrual cycle as a vital sign, that is absolutely the outcome, I suppose you could say, that I think is really beneficial at times, because it's not the easy path. The easy path is certainly not to have an issue and have to figure it out. It would arguably be a whole lot easier if you could just identify whatever problem that you're having and go to the doctor and get a magical pill that would just solve everything, and literally solve it, and you would never have to think about it again, and you wouldn't have to do anything else. I mean, certainly that would be a lot simpler, but obviously it doesn't work like that. And so when you're choosing this path of looking at the issue, not medicating it away, and trying to identify the root cause, making those shifts and changes, it's typically not an overnight instant scenario. You typically have to spend some time researching, spend some time identifying those right practitioners that are going to help you on your journey, and also try certain things and see what your body responds to, what it doesn't respond to. Identify what actually moves the needle, because often what actually moves the needle and makes that significant shift in your symptoms, it's not always the first thing that you think would help. And so, of course, this is one of the reasons why I love looking at the menstrual cycle as a vital sign, because it takes us out of the theoretical realm. It takes us out of this idea of like, this should work, or this is what this person is doing, or that person is doing, or this is what usually works for my clients with this issue. And it makes you look at the actual person in front of you and their actual cycle and what is going to improve it, what is going to not improve it. And ultimately, when you figure out what is going to improve those symptoms, then you can set someone up for a lifetime of success and better health, optimal hormone balance, because we're really working with their body and we have this way to track in real time if it's actually helping. So with that said, I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Karmen. And if you are listening in September or October of 2024, registration is currently open for our next round of the Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. So make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive. That's FAMMLIVE for details. If you are listening after that, if you're listening in the future, still head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE and grab the details for the next round. So with that said, I hope that you have a wonderful weekend, whenever you're tuning into the show. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting. And that's a wrap. If you're loving the FAMM research series or our FAMM practitioner series, then I know you'll love our Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. It's a 9-month immersive experience that will completely transform the way you work with clients, allowing you to not only teach fertility awareness to your clients, but to use the menstrual cycle as a vital sign and diagnostic tool in your women's health practice. Our next class starts on October 22nd, so there's still time for you to reserve your spot. There's no other program like this offered anywhere. Transform your practice in 9 months. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive to apply now. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE.